We've got the schedule. We know the sequencing of games. Let's try to predict wins and losses now that we have that information.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. Today, we break down win-loss predictions for the Bengals 2024 NFL schedule here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find this podcast on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts, and we appreciate all of you who subscribe, and shout out to all of you who make us your first listen and all the everydayers out there. And maybe it's a commute listen. Maybe you don't listen to us on the way to work anymore, and COVID broke that habit. Well, if you're commuting to work again, just a friendly reminder, easy content for your car ride to work. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Speaking of predicting wins and losses, right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And James, we talked yesterday about the big takeaways when we looked at the schedule. Now, as we look at win-loss predictions, the potential fast start path starts in week one with the most heavily favored team in week one as of today, the Cincinnati Bengals hosting the New England Patriots.
Yeah, I think that this is, dare I say it, Jake, must win. And not must win because of standings, but you just got to say it out loud. First year head coach, first game after the Bill Belichick era, and you're dealing with either Drake May or Jacoby Brissett. I know their defense is good in New England. I know they have some young weapons that could come on. Javon Baker, we talked about. Jalen Polk, we've talked about pre-draft. You got to win this game. And so I'm not sure there's going to be anyone inside the Bengals organization on this podcast, certainly, that plays the schedule game, that does these predictions, that has this as a loss. I have it as a win, and I would be shocked and really disappointed, honestly, if the Bengals didn't handle business week one against the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, something would have had to have gone very wrong for us to even really consider this game a game that should really press the Bengals to win. And that week one, the biggest line in week one reflects that. Everybody, you're right, should look at this and say that is a game the Bengals should take care of business, get off to that quote unquote fast start, get to 1-0, and then things get tricky with week two. But my approach when I was looking at this, James, is there are games that you expect the Bengals should win, and there are games that are kind of coin flips to me. There aren't games where I'm going to be like, yeah, no, the Bengals, they're losing that game. Maybe one on the entire schedule do I feel like really sets up poorly for the Bengals, and we'll get there, I promise. But
how about that tease?
It's not the week two game. I'll tell you that. Week two game feels like a coin flip to me. It probably slightly favors the Chiefs because you're in Kansas City. Both of these teams, though, should be good teams. They know each other very well. I mentioned this on Bleacher Report last night. If Rashee Rice is dealing with a short-term suspension and it's not like a commissioner's list, he's out for the season kind of thing, probably out for this game. And that's an area where the Chiefs were already deficient last year. I know they added Xavier Worthy, but trying to figure out what they're doing with their wide receivers, and they still have Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes and all these things, and they're probably going to be fine. But I'm not looking at this game and thinking, yeah, that's probably a game the Bengals were losing. I see it more as a coin flip.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you win sort of ugly because I do think it won't be perfect. It's 23-13 or something against New England. And then you go to Kansas City with the chance to go to 2-0. I have this as a loss, but it's obviously winnable. I have it as a loss just because if we're saying that they handle business here, then you go down the list and you're like, all right, well, there's going to be a loss or two that is disappointing. There's going to be times this year that in don't go the Bengals way. And I could see them going in there and beating the Chiefs, not by 3, but by 10. I could, no doubt, because for a bunch of factors. But at the same time, are the Chiefs capable? Absolutely. We know that. They have a really good defense. And I think this Bengals offense will still be trying to hit its stride. I think the Bengals defense will be working through some things, even though they're better on paper than they were certainly by the end of last season and what they were last season. So I think it'll be a close game. I had the Chiefs winning it. Wouldn't shock me at all. Wouldn't surprise me. I do like the idea of you put coin flip. It's a coin flip game to me, but I have the Bengals starting 1-1.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a lot of games as coin flips because, like I said, there aren't very many games where I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that's a really bad way that's worked out.
I see some good ways it's worked out, though.
Yeah,
I will say that, like right now.
There's two of them. One's at the beginning and one's at the end, even where they have that really compact stretch of 3 games in 11 days, which we'll get to in the end of the show. Even that, I think, isn't the worst break in the world, even though it's not a great break. There are a couple other teams that have similar stretches this year, but you're right. The next couple of games, you're talking about 3-1. I think. I mean, we can lump these together: Washington and Carolina. Carolina on the road. Maybe Bryce Young takes a huge step, and the Carolina Panthers suddenly become a good football team. But another set of young quarterbacks and teams that are really trying to find their path forward in Washington, Carolina to go with New England, and probably a little bit more continuity in New England than in Washington or Carolina. But those are both games, including your primetime Monday Night Football in Cincinnati game in Week 3 against Washington, which could be the Ring of Honor game. I don't know. Did the Bengals announce that? They like to do early season primetime Ring of Honor games, so that could be Ring of Honor game. Those games look good for the Bengals. 3-1 is probably where we're at after Week 4.
Yeah, I'm glad that you lump those together because that is the minimum for September. Yeah. The minimum. And that's part of why I'm like, all right, are they really going to start 4-0? Like, I'm trying to be right. It's May, but trying to be right. It's like, okay, so you stub your toe on the Chiefs, fine. You lose close. You feel good because, well, you beat the hell out of the Commanders. You handle business in Carolina, a road trip I am looking forward to, by the way. Not that anyone cares. And then it sets up for Week 5, Baltimore, the rematch from Thursday night last year, the first of 2 matchups. Their first division game now isn't even in the first month of the season.
Yeah.
Where do you have this? Because this to me is their second test. First test is Kansas City. Second real test, Super Bowl contending type test, is against Baltimore at home.
Yeah, how about the late start for the division games? The Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't think, play a division game until Week 11 or something like that. It's really late for the Steelers. We thought Week 5 was pretty late for the Bengals. That seems to be a trend for the AFC North this year. I like the Bengals in this one. There's a revenge game factor. There's a get back factor. There's the Mike McDonald departure and his disciples who have left the Baltimore Ravens. You're still early in the year here. Maybe they're still sorting things out on their offensive line where they've had a lot of turnover. And honestly, you talk about must win, and I see must win in Week 1 if you want to talk about it that way, as you better win this game or things are really threatening to go off the rails on you. And that's purely on paper. This one I see as a very important game to win because I guess I'm just going to spoil it. That Thursday night trip to Baltimore in November is the one that I see as like really unfavorable for the Bengals.
Spoiler. Look at you spoiling it. I think the Bengals win this game.
They need to.
And for sure, you got to win in the division. I think they're better than the Ravens. And the Ravens have lost a lot. The Bengals are at home. They'll be rolling 3-1. It's a 1:00 game. I think the Bengals handle business and get to 4-1.
Well, if they get to 4-1, they're getting to 5-1 because if they go and lose to the New York Giants in prime time, again, much like some of these other softer games at the first 6 weeks of the season, obviously anything could change between now and then. Who knows how we're talking about this game going into Week 6? But right now, looking at this game on paper, it's a game that I can't figure out why it's in prime time in the first place. I guess they just had to find a primetime game for the big market Giants, but the Giants shouldn't be a good football team this year. And so this should be a game that the Bengals take care of business. And you could be talking 5-1 here. To me, the first 6 games, the first third of the schedule here, I'm looking like between 4-2 and 6-0. 4-2 is probably the low end. 6-0 if things are going really, really well. And probably somewhere in the middle is how that turns out.
Sure. And I have them handling business and being right in the middle, 5-1. And you take that all day long going into a couple tough games at Cleveland, Philly, plenty ahead. We will get to those games coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is here to give you a shot at bringing home a big win of your own, whether you're wagering on the NBA playoffs as Nikola Jokic tries to take down the Timberwolves after they looked like they were going to run through the defending champs. And Jokic said, no, baby, no, that's not how it's going to go. 3-2 right now. The Nuggets have the lead. Maybe you think that the Nuggets are going to win the series. Well, you can throw $5 on them to win game 6. And if that bet wins, you get $150 in bonus bets with FanDuel. That's for every new customer. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. So whether you want to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, so much more. By the way, we're recording this on a Thursday. I threw $5 on the Mavericks to handle business against the Thunder, and they did. If I was a new customer, I would get that bonus bet right now of $150. So don't delay. Go to FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sports.
Second third of the schedule here, James, things get a little spicier with a road trip to Cleveland followed by hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. A couple of tough games, like you said, back to back. And one of the more difficult stretches on the schedule. There really aren't very many gauntlet type things this year, but this set of 5 games, the middle third of the season, Cleveland, Philly, a soft one with Vegas in the middle, the short week to Baltimore, followed by a long trip to go see the Chargers. And the Chargers, I don't really know what to make of quite yet with Jim Harbaugh taking over there. That is a relatively tough stretch of 5 games. And if you had to look at it in thirds, I would say from an opponent perspective on paper, it looks like the toughest set of 5 games or toughest 6 weeks for the Bengals on the schedule.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's fair. And so the Bengals flying high 5-1 in my prediction as of now. And then you go to Cleveland and there will be all the Bengals, they're at the top of the AFC North right now. They beat the Ravens and there's going to be some hype. And I think that the Cleveland Browns are a tough matchup. I don't think they're going to get the doors blown off. I think those days are over. But I have the Browns winning this one and the Bengals falling to 5-2 on the year, coming off of that short week. It's a little shorter because you're playing on Sunday night. Not a lot days wise, none days wise, but just a little bit. You lose some hours there, go on the road. I think they drop that game to Cleveland.
The Browns have a similarly sort of soft open to the schedule. They get the Giants, the Raiders, the Commanders. Then they get Philly before the Cincinnati game. They come off a 3-game road trip. This is the start of a 3-game homestand for the Browns. And I guess yesterday when we were talking about their history of playing the Browns in these hype games, the primetime games, the season opener, this will be the first time the Browns are back in Cleveland in a month. So they'll go from September 22nd when they play the Giants at home to October 20th, a month later, where they get the Bengals at home. All right, I spoke too soon. It looks like there will be plenty of reasons for Browns fans to get amped up for this one after a month of their team being away. You can see the hostile environment being an issue. I would like to say this is a game the Bengals show that they figured out Cleveland. And the addition of Trent Brown or Amarius Mims at this point, who knows who's playing, who's available, helps them deal with Cleveland's pass rush. And they have some answers for Cleveland's corners with their multiple options at wide receiver. But it's hard to see this as anything better than a coin flip on the road in Cleveland until they show that they can go play in that environment and play well in that environment. It feels like it's been a while since they've played well on the road in Cleveland. And that is the challenge this year. I could see this going that way from that perspective, just of it's a tough place for them to play and they haven't been able to overcome it in recent years, and they need to show that they can.
No doubt. That's what will be disheartening if we're recording a post-game show. And I'm at, I think it's Cleveland Browns Stadium now. It used to be First Energy, but I'm there in Cleveland and they can't get over the hump, falling to 5-2. And it doesn't get easier, to your point, because you come home, you got to deal with Philly. And this is the first time that Joe Burrow will face off against Jalen Hurts. 425, big game. I think Philly's going to be pretty good. I don't really believe in their coach, but I think Jalen Hurts is tough. They obviously have a good running game. We know that. And they have weapons on the outside. And I think that they'll be able to do enough. As weird as it was at the end of last year, I think Philly will be really, really good this year. And I think that this this is one of those tough stretches where you're starting to question things a little bit. Bengals were 5-1. I have them going from 5-1 to 5-3.
I think I like this game for the Bengals. There are some differences, obviously, between last year's team and this year's team in Philly, but they really fell apart down the stretch and have to put it back together. I mean, they chose to retain their coaching staff. They made some changes. They bring in Vic Fangio. Maybe that's the difference. Maybe Vic Fangio running that
It's a
defense
huge difference.
with
Yeah.
the additions of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. If those corners hit to go with Darius Slay, and those guys are good right away for Philly, then this is a really tough matchup. If Jalen Carter takes a step in year 2, Jordan Davis puts it together. They have depth on that defense, but at the same time, like, I don't love their linebackers, and they do have rookies at corner, rookies that are good in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, most likely to go with Darius Slade. But I think an exploitable defense, and they lose Jason Kelsey at center, which could matter. They got Tyler Steen currently slotted to start at right guard. And so while that offensive line should still be good, they're going to be missing some pieces. And I just look at that decline down the stretch last year, and I know that there were some injuries they were dealing with, and I'm not sure how much I believe in Philly. And so while Cleveland, to me, on the road is a coin flip skewing negative, and so you could pencil that in as maybe the negative side of 50-50. This one I see as more of a coin flip with odds. And I like the Bengals a little bit at home in this one as a bounce back game. But
wow.
I don't know. Anything could happen between now and then, but I do diverge from you a little bit there, where I like their chances in this one to a reasonable degree.
You know who else is hoping you're right about that Philly coaching staff? Bill Belichick. He's just lingering over there like, ooh, he's eyeing. He's in the club right now looking at all these coaching jobs. Anyways, all right. So with the win losses, I'm at 5-3. Then it's Raiders at home. And now we get back to, all right, you got to handle business in these type of situations. And I do think the Bengals handle business in this type of situation. They get the 6-3. Do we need to say much about the Raiders other than Marvin Lewis returns home to Paycor Stadium for the first time?
Well, we even, like, in what capacity? I'm sure the cameras will find him at some point.
Yeah.
What is his, like, he's like a defensive assistant or something?
No, I think he's like assistant head coach.
Yeah, but okay. Regardless, this is the Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer game, but who's throwing them the ball? Is it Gardner Minshew? Is it Aiden O'Connell?
Assistant head coach. I mean, when Antonio Pierce gets fired in 2 years, Marvin Lewis is the interim head coach of the Raiders, baby.
Yeah. And again, I think this is a defensive front that could be problematic. But then once you get past Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby, the rest of those guys are not very scary.
Well,
So
in the quarterback,
you should take care
Gardner
of this.
Minshew.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be calling about Jake Browning right now.
And the Bengals would promptly hang up the phone. Yeah,
Well,
I like
they
the
would.
Bengals
I'm just saying, like, Jake Browning might win that job there. Like, that's why I'm down on that. I don't know if Pierce is good or not. I don't mean to be mean to him. I just no quarterback.
Yeah.
All these tight ends and no quarterback.
Well, and like limited strengths on defense. There's tons of holes on that roster. They could overachieve a little bit, but like you're talking about, maybe 6 wins is overachieving, and at home, yeah, hard to see that going any other way than Bengals W. But here's the first one where I'm looking at it and I'm saying I don't see this is a coin flip skewing very negative. It's more of like a 4-sided die for all my nerds out there. You have a 1 out of 4 chance instead of a 1 out of 2 chance in this one. To me, this one they have a chance, obviously, but Baltimore on a short week on Thursday Night Football on the road. Thursday Night Football road games for division opponents generally go poorly for the road team. Don't love the proximity, as we discussed yesterday, to Joe Burrow's injury nearly a year ago, a week later in Baltimore on Thursday Night Football. This one has bad juju around it for me, but would love to see it be a defiant revenge game kind of thing for the Bengals as well.
Yep. I agree. It's a tough spot. I will give you my thoughts on Bengals Ravens part 2, 9 days from a year with Joe Burrow's injury. Week 10 this year, they play on Thursday Night Football. I do that coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whatever you're into, from speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Jake. This is the biggest game of the year. And it's the biggest game of the year because of everything that's going to go into it, from a Joe Burrow injury, the storylines. It's a short week, thank goodness, in a way. But that's going to feed into the storylines more. The Bengals, and I was listening to Dan Hoard today, the Bengals are 0-10 and in night primetime games on the road in the AFC North. 0-10. And it might not be on the road. It might just be night primetime games. Is that true? Anyways, I forget the stat exactly, but they're 0-10. It might be on the road or it might just be against the AFC North. But they stink at primetime games against the AFC North. I think this changes right here. I think Burrow goes there. I said it earlier, hinted at it. The Bengals are better than the Ravens. The Ravens lost a ton. But we can make the argument that, yeah, the Bengals have lost a lot over the past couple of years. They've also added. And yeah, they lose some coaching. You know, you lose Brian Callahan, but I think Mike McDonald, losing your defensive backs coach to Tennessee to Brian Callahan, I think those things matter a ton. And so I think Joe Burrow goes there and would have done it last year. Didn't get to last year. Will do it this year. Win in Baltimore. Handle business. The Bengals improve to 7-3.
That's bold. That's a
sweep the Ravens. Get your brooms out.
That's a tough spot because for me, that's the hardest game on the schedule.
No doubt.
Would love it if that happens. Would love to see the bounce back there.
So yeah, they fall to 5-3 after dropping 2 straight, and then they beat the Raiders and then handle business on a short week against the Ravens. I would take that all day if that's the trade-off for sure.
Sure. And then you get the Los Angeles Chargers on the road. Chargers, they're holes on that team, but they've added to their offensive line. Joe Alt, a huge addition there, of course. They add Lab McConkey, but they've had significant turnover at wide receiver. Hayden Hurst revenge game for the Chargers. He's currently slated as tight end 2 on that depth chart. But besides Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Asante Samuel, Derwin James on that defense, there are plenty of players to exploit. There's some youth. The defensive line, I know they've got Bosa and Mack. We'll see who's healthy at that point. Those guys can present challenges, but I think I'd like the Bengals here. Outside of that, it's a long road trip. It's their longest road trip of the season. Their biggest only West Coast game. So I do see this as coin flip B, but I do skew Bengals here.
The return to SoFi. First time since Super Bowl 56. There'll be a question or two. Oh, what do you remember? You know, I can already see that happening. I think the Bengals win this one. It is close. It's going to be. I think the Chargers are going to be good. Just say it now. I think they're going to be good. They're going to play different, but I think they're going to be well coached. But the Bengals have, to me, a better quarterback, more talent on the outside. I think their defense will sort of be hitting their stride at this time, where they've adjusted. I think the offensive line will certainly be gelling at this point too. And so I know I have the Bengals winning this one. I think it'll be a tight one. Burrow, Herbert, why wouldn't it be? But improving to 8-3, going into the bye on a win, and that's going to be a really, really happy flight home, the longest flight of the season.
Yeah. Coming out of the bye into the final third of the season, the Bengals' first game with the Pittsburgh Steelers, they get the first one at home. Good old Sunday 1 p.m. start. Who knows what's going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers at quarterback at that point in time between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? Who knows how the season is going? I think I've said this. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Kind of depends on how the first 2/3 of the seasons have gone for the Steelers. If the Steelers are in a spot where they need to claw to get back to 9-8, then I feel better about the Steelers' chances. But if they've done well early in the season and they need to fall back to 9-8, I feel better about the Bengals' chances, which I know is a very glib way to talk about this. They've had major overhaul at the wide receiver position. They return a lot of problematic defenders. They add Patrick Queen to the mix on defense. We'll see how he does outside of the Mike McDonald system, where he was paired with a very helpful running mate in Roquan Smith. But I like the Bengals at home against the Steelers. I don't feel too threatened by the Steelers without taking any context into perspective. And of course, when you talk about week 13 at this point, you're talking about a lot of context that will be relevant by them. But at this point in May, we don't know what that context will be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they handle business here. It's a tough game playing the Steelers, but you're coming off of a bye week. You're in the thick of the AFC playoff race, not just the AFC North. We're talking about 1 seed potential. And so this is a game that you got to win. And then it's going to be a big game, week 14, Dallas, Monday Night Football. Least important game for the final, really from week 8 on, after the Eagles game. Least important. So I have them losing this one because it's a really tough one. They haven't won in Dallas since 1988. At the same time, could they win it? Absolutely. I think Mike McCarthy could be on the hot seat. I don't think Dallas is that good. I just think that it is a unique game, unique spot, all of those things. And if they drop one more here in December, and well, we'll see if I have them dropping any more in December. But yeah, I think that this is one that they could easily lose.
This is another one that feels coin flippy to me, but the history of playing poorly in Dallas is something that really does stand out. And I don't really buy like the long-term history, but they haven't been good in Dallas in recent years either. Prime time in Dallas, a huge environment for the biggest stadium in pro football, I think. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I coin flip skewing negatively here. And then they follow it up with a trip to Tennessee, where I just believe the quarterback edge here has to make this feel like a game where I feel pretty good about the Bengals' chances.
This is the T. Higgins audition. Come sign me in free agency, Brian. That's what this is. The home, for real. I mean, let's go to Nissan Stadium. An exciting time, I think, for the Bengals, because they're going to be playing for a lot. Meanwhile, and coming off of a loss on a short week. Meanwhile, the Titans, who knows where they're at in the standings? I agree with you. I have the Bengals beating the Titans. They should. We'll see if they do. And then it's another short week. The second of 2 Thursday night games. At least the Bengals are at home. They have to fly back from Tennessee. At least it's a short flight. They play the Cleveland Browns on Thursday Night Football. How do you feel about this one, Jake?
I skew Bengals because it's at home. And we just talked about how division teams in Thursday Night Football, the road team tends to be at a handicap. They tend to be behind the 8 ball in those games for whatever reason. It is a short road trip in this case for Cleveland, staying in the state, of course. But this is something the NFL did a lot of this year on Thursday Night Football. There are a lot of divisional matchups on Thursday Night Football. The Bengals are one of like 12 teams or so. I counted them yesterday with 2 Thursday night games this year, or 2 Thursday games this year. And I think that's terrible. I think that's stupid. This game should just be on Sunday. Putting it on Thursday after they've just come off a short week is, I don't know. Don't like it. To try to cut myself off there and make it brief. But I like the Bengals' chances here because they're at home on the short week for the divisional Thursday night game.
Yeah, I have them winning. They lose that first game against Cleveland. They get a little payback here. And this is when we could be seriously, this could be for the AFC North and them clinching the AFC North. In my scenario of them already having swept the Ravens, handling business against the Steelers in that first matchup. Now you get a win against the Browns and improve to 4-1 in the division. And then a game that who knows what's on the line, but you're playing the Broncos week 17. You have that longer break in there, that 9 or 10 day break. I think they could be a real candidate to play on Saturday on December 28th because of that. Still, I think that this, regardless of how Bo Nix is, regardless if the Denver Broncos impress, this is a game you should win. And I have them winning.
Yeah, definitely a game you should win. The Broncos just shouldn't have enough on offense even if they do have some pieces on defense, Pat Surtain being chief among those. But this should be a game where you outclass the Broncos. Once you get late in the season, who knows what's going on? And all of these later season games, injury stuff is going to be a huge role. That's always a caveat that we haven't talked about very much. That's my throwaway line there about injury caveats. They finish the season on the road in Pittsburgh. And whether or not they win this game, to me, has a lot to do with what's at stake. I think that the Bengals are better than the Steelers, but do the Bengals need this game? That is the big question at that point. Probably fair to say they need it for some reason or another. That's likely the way it works out in an AFC that should be pretty tight. And if that's the case, then I like the Bengals to win and really turn the tables in the AFC North and have figured things out this year in the AFC North after people are like, man, this team really needs to learn how to win in the AFC North. I see this as a year where the Bengals have an opportunity to show that they can. That said, it is still a really tough division. So while we're projecting them here to maybe be 5-1 in the AFC North, maybe it is they drop a game we're not expecting. Who knows? But I like the Bengals' chances against the Steelers this year.
I have them 4-2. I have them losing this game because I don't. To your point, I don't think it's going to matter, and I do think that they split with the Steelers. I think they split with the Browns, and they're going to beat the hell out of the Ravens. And by beat the hell out of them, I mean sweep them. It might be close, but I do. I think that there's a clear gap to me from Bengals, Ravens, and the rest of this division, as good as this division is. And so that's where I think the Bengals will get up even more for those games, split with the other two teams, finish 12-5, 4-2 in the division, certainly win the AFC North for the third time in 4 years, and 12 wins, even though I have them losing to Kansas City, they may be in the mix there for that number one seed, certainly one of the top seeds in the AFC. So 12-5 is my official prediction as we play the schedule game for the first time in 2024.
I think I see it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 games that feel real coin flippy to me. And so depending on the way those goes, that's going to have a big impact, obviously, on the bottom line. And then are they going to drop a game they really should win? Like, are they going to be surprised New York Giants get up for Sunday Night Football at home in week 6? I don't think so, but usually something we don't expect to happen does happen. So that's where the variance comes from. But anywhere from 11 to 13 wins feels pretty reasonable to me based on how you feel, based on the sequencing. The only game that got way harder for me is when you think they're going to win. And that's that short week going into Baltimore in week 10, a couple of weeks before their bye. The rest of it, the teams they play in that stretch where it's a whole bunch of tight games, they get Tennessee in the middle of that in the Dallas, Tennessee, Cleveland stretch. They get to play Cleveland at home on that short week. So there are some things that breaks their way, having a relatively soft start to the year as well. And that last place schedule should pay dividends for the Bengals this year. That's kind of the bottom line here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. And I think the Pittsburgh one is one that loss is one where it's like, yeah, they probably should win that game, but I could see it going the other way. But there will be a game in there that's like that. And that's why I have it 12-5. I don't know how to be there, but I do. I think they get to 12 wins and we have playoff football in Cincinnati once again. Yeah.
And the big question for a lot of those games is going to come down to trench play and how the Bengals additions and continuity on the offensive line plays out and how Joe Burrow's doing from a health perspective. When Joe's healthy, you'd like them in all these games. And that's why there's nothing that feels like a dead lost game looking at this schedule. That's going to do it, though, for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. We'll be back next week with more coverage on your Cincinnati Bengals. Until then, thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.